Just good morning to everyone. So last class we got started on international business, and we'll follow up a little bit on that today. Um, and just start things off just by reviewing. If you weren't in last in the Zoom last class, the key points are just understanding what the benefits are to international trade. What are the positive reasons for a company to operate across borders? So, see if there's any. Okay, so I'll give you a couple more seconds to just join the Kahoot if you want. So again, it's if you want to, it's 6646800, and we'll 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get started. So a little bit easy one. What is Canada's leading trading partner? Who do we trade the most amount of goods with? Is it China, the US, UK, or Australia? So definitely due to the proximity and their similar interests, that's usually the first place Canadian companies go. So if you remember the McDonald's case study, what was one of the things that McDonald's didn't do when they expanded to India? So McDonald's did not do one of these things. They made 3 adaptations, but one of these was not done. Was it cold chain management, local sourcing, new menu items, or special drive-through windows? Yeah, so they didn't have any drive-through windows at all because the streets didn't work out. They had deliveries by scooters, but other things they tried was keeping the food refrigerated from the warehouse all the way to the restaurant and the truck and so on. They had local sources of ingredients, and they increased new menu items. So what would be some of the benefits of international trade? Is it less advertising, lower production costs, simpler logistics, or streamlined organizations? So it actually probably makes the organization a bit more complicated and the logistics a little harder, but in return you can find the lowest wages, the lowest cost of material, and the lowest production costs. So the blue one, the lower production cost, is a big benefit. We've got Adam leading right now. One benefit that does not affect quality would be new production methods, skilled labor, economies of scale, or advanced technology. So economies of scale means that as you produce more, price goes down because you get better at producing it. So it would affect quantity, but the other 3, having access to new methods, access to skilled labor, access to technology, would improve the quality. Out of the way. When someone buys an iPhone, it is an example of a domestic transaction, international transaction, expensive transaction, or electronic transaction. So if it's something that's only related to Canada, like you go to a local Yonge and Eglinton restaurant when they ever reopen and buy something there, that's all that, everything stayed within Canada. But it's when we involve other countries, it's an international transaction, and the other 2 were words that I just made up to fill out the choices. congratulations to Audrey. Just close that window. Okay. So one thing about the Zoom, I don't know if I've told you before, but if you go down to the bottom menu and it says participants, and you click on that, the number of people in the meeting should appear on your right-hand side. And then there's a button there that says raise hand. So if you want to stop things to ask a question, you know, you can go to participants at the bottom menu and then hit the raise hand button. And then I'll know that you are interested in saying something or asking a question. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about international trade. So I don't know if you had time to read the article. It was an article about a failure in international business. Because again, we can learn from the successes and we can learn from the failure. And what it was about why Barbie actually, they had opened a big store in Shanghai. It was, I guess it was actually called the House of Barbie. It not only had toys, it had clothes, it had other items, you know, light with Barbie's name on it, you know, licensed products, especially clothes. And although they invested a lot of money in it, it ended up closing. So you might think, well, maybe it didn't succeed because, you know, Barbie has a certain look, you know, with the blonde hair, maybe that didn't match the kids in China, and they didn't want a toy that looked that way. That wasn't exactly the case. Actually, they had some locally designed Barbies that were more representative of the people in Shanghai, but it was the traditional sort of North American Barbie that was the best-selling item. What ended up happening was a couple of things. So firstly, they didn't look into what other toys sold in China. If you go and read the article, they talk about, you know, that educational toys were a little more popular and sort of fun toys were not as popular. So it may have been the switch of North America, where North America, you know, fun toys were number one, and then educational toys were a smaller size of the market. It was switched in China. So there wasn't as much room for Barbie to succeed. But then it also goes and talks about pricing. And so it talks about things like jeans that cost a couple, $200 for jeans, you know, a premium pricing strategy. And the point was that Barbie didn't establish what the brand meant. They didn't establish themselves as a luxury brand. They opened up this amazing store. Let's see, in our article, do we have okay, so you can find some photos online, but in the article, it doesn't show a photo right now. They open up this huge expensive store and charge luxurious premium prices as if it's like a famous fashion label, but they didn't do any groundwork to establish why Barbie was worth that. You know, it's the opposite of what McDonald's did, whereas McDonald's spent 3 or 4 years researching, then they opened. Barbie just opened their store and their clothing store with a big splash, and it actually, they didn't do the research ahead of time, and kind of they didn't have that brand recognition. And so after 2 years and $30 million, they went out of business. So we can learn a bit why companies lose you know, money, and understand a bit from international business as a result of that. So if you go back to our you know, marketing classes, we talked about the 4 Ps, and for international business, we're just going to add a 5th one called proximity. So just to be aware of you know, that there's, you know, it's going to be slightly different than if you're doing it in a local domestic country. So we want to just understand that when we're talking about 5 Ps, it's preferences. So in China, that would be the preferences for educational toys. Just the product, that's the same. Promotion, that concept's the same. Barbie might not have done enough promotion to succeed in China. Proximity, that's the logistics, you know, how close is it to North America. And then the price, well, in that case for Barbie, it might have been a little off because they were charging $200, a premium price, without, you know, checking what the market would bear. So, you know, you understand, you know, you get access to more markets. So the idea is when you go to international business, you get access to this big market of all the workers, all the factories, all the investors, and all the customers, and hopefully in that big marketplace, you can really improve your quantity, improve your costs, improve your quality. So just be aware, this is the takeaway for today. What are the five P's? Does the product fit? Is the price a good match? Is the proximity sort of in terms of logistics and culture? What are people's preferences? And does the promotion work? So, you want to think about the product. So is, for when going back to McDonald's, they had to figure out, well, were there potatoes in India that would make their kind of fries? And initially there weren't. So they had to ship in special potatoes and train the farmers to grow it sort of the same way, so you would get the crispy golden fries that McDonald's, you would recognize in McDonald's in North America. So the product, is it something that you can make there? Maybe, if it's a restaurant, can they find local partners who can make it, or can they, easily get the product there by shipping it? Does it suit the target market? Is it something that is going to be desired or needed in a target market? So if you're talking about a place in the world where it's a city with very narrow roads, an SUV is not going to be the best car. So, maybe something a little smaller is the product that will suit them a bit better. So, you understand, that there's going to be, different natural resources. You might have some products that are unique to a region. It has to be usable in that target area. So Canada Goose, they don't sell winter parkas in countries around the equator. Instead, they make rain gear. So that's a small modification of their product. If they tried to sell their parkas, in Asia near the equator, it wouldn't be popular. So they have to sell something different. There's, you have to be able, the product has to be something that's used locally. When then there's some exceptions, like something that's known around the world for being unique, like honey from New Zealand is considered very exotic. Kobe beef is recognized around the world. Quebec maple syrup. These products that are very recognizable, they can travel, but there's probably going to be some kind of a modification needed. Here are some questions that they would ask about price. And basically, is it possible to get the product there at a reasonable cost? Some things that'll change up the price are, the shipping cost. If you have to ship it a long way, that's going to add money. Is there a free trade agreement? And with the US, with Europe, we have a free trade agreement, but with other countries, there's tariffs, extra taxes that would have to be paid. So, a Canadian company would have to make sure that the cost to get that product to another part of the world isn't too much. So if you, if Barbie is going to ship their jeans to China and they're going to charge $200 and all the other jeans are $50, that pricing just isn't going to fit. So those are two things to consider. Does anyone have any questions so far about any thoughts before I move on? Okay. Oops, wrong tab. Just getting used to Zoom myself, so I make a few mistakes every now and then. So, can the, understand that transportation tariffs and taxes will add to the price, so make sure the price is competitive. So proximity, is it near the home country? Is it the culture similar? So you'd want to, that's why the US is our biggest trading partner. It's so near to Canada, it's very easy to ship it there, and it has a very similar country, similar culture. So you want to look at, proximity. Is it easy enough to get there? So if you're a Canadian company, Australia might have a similar culture. Canada Goose products, they could make raincoats that appeal to Australians. However, shipping it there is going to be a lot more complicated than just going to the US. So can you get the product there quickly and inexpensively? So, geographic trading partners are often good trading partners because the logistics are simple, and they often have a free trade agreement. If there's too much of a distance, there could be a delay. The product could be damaged. The product might not arrive on time, and that would be a reason that sets the business up for failure. So preferences. Uh, are the preferences of the target country similar to markets where the product has already succeeded? So, if consumers already use something comparable, like if in China, if Mattel had noticed that there was a local doll that was very popular, that might be a sign that Barbie would succeed. What they failed to notice was that people didn't have a high recognition for Barbie. So when they put Barbie on clothing, it didn't register. With McDonald's, they looked ahead and they said, wait a minute, people cannot eat beef in India. We'll have to make some local menu items that will match their preferences. And because they took the time to make that adjustment, things succeeded more. So, understand that, you're going to target a similar culture first. You have to create a brand that's recognizable in that area. There's going to be some products, like watches that are made in Switzerland, or wine from certain regions of the world, that will have recognition no matter where they go. But usually, companies are going to target some cultures that are similar to the local culture. And if you take international business, the whole third unit is about finding markets that are similar to Canada and similar to places where the product has already succeeded. So promotion, is the brand well known around the world? Some cases, like Coke, everyone knows where Coke is. It's a local brand. It's not necessary to do much promotion. When Starbucks, they tried to expand to Israel, and they thought everyone would enjoy Starbucks cafes. They wouldn't need to do much promotion, just open it up. People would see the Starbucks and they'd automatically go. But it turned out people didn't really know what Starbucks was. And to go back to preferences, people preferred more of the Turkish style of coffee than the Starbucks drinks. So just opening up Starbucks in major cities in Israel didn't succeed because they didn't take into account preferences, and they didn't take into account promotion. And every now and then you might see an advertisement, where there's an embarrassing translation. You know, American Airlines, they wanted to have promote, I think it was American Airlines, it might have been United. They wanted to launch a campaign that was fly in comfort, to say how nice the seats were, how friendly the customer service was, how nice the meals were. And it was translated to fly naked in one of the Spanish markets somehow. And so something like that, every now and then there's going to be some promotions that don't exactly work for cultural reasons. And, you want to plan ahead to avoid something like that. Companies sometimes need to alter their promotion to suit the company. Here's an example of one that didn't work. It was Burger King was making this, what they called a Texican Whopper, like a hamburger, but with a fried tomato and some, spices. And so it was supposed to be appealing in the southern US and in Mexico. And so they had this cowboy to symbolize the Texas part of it, and they had a Mexican wrestler to symbolize Mexico. But and it's sort of united for one reason, have it the way you like. But it turned out that this was, um, some of the citizens in Mexico found it very offensive. Like, why couldn't they be the tall cowboy? Why were they the short, midget masked wrestler? And the advertisement looked okay in the United States. There was no, translation errors, but just the imagery was very offensive, and they had to change it and apologize. So one part of international business is, making sure that there aren't any, in cultural embarrassments or misunderstandings. So, um, what one Canadian company, that has tried to expand overseas has been Canada Goose, and if you have more time, you can watch that later. Stop the share. Uh, so that's sort of, again, the takeaways, right? So if we were to ask you right after this class sort of what the 5 Ps were and what's the key takeaway, that would be, what's the short definition of place, of proximity, of promotion, of product, of pricing, and of preference. That would be a good takeaway to have. So if you have any questions about that, you could throw it in the chat window, or you could stay in the chat room after everyone logs off. I'm going to show you, I'm going to share my screen again, and then I'm going to show you our Google Classroom. So where's my, okay, so I want to show you the, this was the handout that sort of went along with today, and basically has the same content that we talked about. So if I'm in our classroom, here's the next project. Sort of, this is a bigger project, so it can be good to do this. You understand your mark can't go down. If you need to improve your mark, I would suggest that you work on this. So I'm going to go to our classwork tab at the top. I'm just going to Control F for the word launch. It's called International Product Launch. And just to view the assignment there. So here's sort of the idea that if you would like to work on your mark and you would like a preview of what is going to happen in BBB4M, the International Business Grade 12 e-learning course, here would be sort of an idea, to select a Canadian product or service of your choice, to try and pick a country where it would, a market where it would succeed. So you start off, you research a little bit, what's the main product, is it a restaurant, what's it known for, what's the price level, is it a premium price, is it a discount price, things like that. You could look for a market where the product is not currently available and explain why it's a suitable choice according to the 5P. This one here, this middle one here, 3B, I think is something as North Toronto students you need to work on. So by that I mean, if I'm saying, oh, Australia would be great for Mountain Equipment Co-op because it has a, it's similar to Canada. Okay, but what does Mountain Equipment Co-op sell? It sells outdoor goods. Is there a way I could go and find the number of people in Australia who are active in outdoor sports? Could I go to Australia's, government, and they have a Department of Statistics? Could I find out how many people are active? And I could say, well, Australia would be a good market because 75% of Australians are active and 30% say they go camping on a regular basis. Wouldn't that sentence about 30% going camping be a much more relevant and specific sentence? Or, if I'm saying that Mountain Equipment Co-op targets Canadians aged 25 to 34. And then I could say, oh, in Australia, there, there's 15 million people aged 15 to 24 who are just ready to buy Mountain Equipment Co-op um, or products. Or I could say many people go hiking. In Australia, there are dozens of public parks and hiking trails. Could I get that demographic, that number? That's something, really a fact that's really unique. And so getting those specific points is an area of improvement for North Toronto students. Don't just say, hey, it's a good fit. Well, yes, hopefully so. Can you find some 2 or 3 stats to back you up? Next class, we'll talk a little bit about trade barriers, which are things that make trade more difficult. So that's what number 4 is. You'd understand, okay, if we're going to go to Australia, well, there's going to be the logistics of getting there. Do we have a free trade agreement with Australia? That's something the company would have to look into. And then you want to, lastly, explain how your plan would work, and try to include steps like first they should do this, then they should do that, adding specific steps. So if you wanted an example of here where it says, if you can see, I have my cursor, it says Swiss Chalet International Product Launch. We all know Swiss Chalet as a Canadian restaurant. There's a couple of proposals how it would expand to England and France and what changes it would need to make. So if you remember all those changes McDonald's made, the supply chain management, the local sources, the delivery bikes, the delivery motorbikes, things like that. You could look at this example. And if you weren't sure what I'm talking about, well, what's a good specific stat? This one that says socioeconomic indicator is a good example of stats that are collected around the world that could show you how similar each country is. And this slideshow includes some websites you can go to see how Canada and other countries compare stats-wise. So that's sort of that's a bigger project to work on to help improve your business mark and help put some of these international business terms into action. So that's 30 minutes for today. I know I spoke a bit quickly. If you have something one-on-one you want to ask, you can type it in the chat window, or you can stay and ask me. Also, you might find it a good exercise if I go back to the classroom. If I go back to my classroom here and share that with you. If you weren't in the classroom on Wednesday, there's a small task for this week where you could call the International 4Ps to try and look online and see if you can find an advertisement for a product in another country and compare with how it's advertised in Canada and the United States, and try to use as much specific terms as possible. That's something you can work on in the other sort of 15 minutes of your business class time today. So yeah, that's it for me. Our next session is Tuesday. What would that be? So I think that would be the 21st. Yeah, Tuesday the 21st at 10 o'clock. Have a look at that international product launch and think of a country that would be suitable for a Canadian product. And then, I know I had a lot of content today in a short amount of time. So if you have questions, stick around in the chat room and ask me. Otherwise, have a good weekend. Okay, so Ella, if you don't have any questions, okay.